5 things every knitter needs to hear. Do you sometimes feel that you are a slow knitter? Or maybe that all the other knitters are better? Or do you sometimes struggle with the look of your finished projects because there's always a little mistake here and there? Or do you sometimes go on a shopping spree and buy all that yarn and all these fancy new knitting needles everyone kept talking about? If this sounds familiar, then this video was made for you, because today I want to talk about a couple of very important topics that rarely get addressed in knitting but do deserve so much more attention. Because the thing is, most people don't struggle with knitting, they struggle with themselves. And I'm no exception. I am the worst doubter when it comes to my yarn choice. I couldn't think of a single project in the past year where I didn't look at my yarn while knitting, thinking, well, this looks kind of weird, only to love it in the end, but often that was quite the process. So let's dive right into it, and I'll share 5 important things every knitter needs to hear at least once. And if you have something you feel more knitters should be aware of, please comment below and share your thoughts. And of course, like this video right now to support my work. Number 1, don't mistake individual preferences for knitting gospel. I often notice when someone asks for help, people tend to generalize. Someone asks, what are the best interchangeable knitting needles? And you can count to 10 and someone will shout CHAGU. I have no clue why, but there seems to be a CHAGU fangirl or boy lurking around every corner. Now, I have no problem with you liking CHAGU whatsoever, but here is the thing. Every knitter has different preferences. Some like to knit lace, others prefer knitting with really chunky yarn. Some knit continental style, others are English throwers. Some love to knit in the round, others prefer flat projects. Some people have big hands, others have really small hands, and so on. So what I'm trying to say here is no two knitters are alike, and as a result, there is not the best yarn, the best knitting needles, the best technique or whatever. There's only the best for you. So, if you get advice, may that be here on my YouTube channel or anywhere else, always take it with a grain of salt. Ask yourself, how do you and I or that person differ? Is that really the right choice for you, or are there other choices? And luckily, it's so easy to Google alternatives these days. And actually, that's precisely the reason why I try to present you with a lot of different choices in my videos. I recently recorded a video with 10 ways to join yarn. Not 1, but 10. So every knitter gets to pick what works for them and their project. So I wish more knitters would make it much clearer that what they are sharing is their personal preference. For example, for me, knitter's pride needles are the best. I love how super fast those needles are and that they aren't all that expensive. And be precise, I am a continental knitter and mostly knit socks, and the tips are just perfect for that. Because if you don't, it might actually lead to a lot of frustration. So don't ever make individual buying decisions based on entirely subjective preferences that may not be mutual. And this brings me directly to my next little issue. Different people may prefer different techniques. Almost every intermediate knitter has some preferred techniques. Some don't like to purl, others love KFB increases, or I don't know, garter stitch. I personally hate knitting garter stitch, but if you love it, then that's none of my business. The other day, I had an interesting discussion on Reddit with someone who did their SSKs without knitting through the back loop in the end, because they liked the way it looked like. Now, this will obviously not result in a left-leaning decrease, but if you like it that way, hey, it's not my place to convince you you don't like it. One can offer help, of course, but it's very important to understand that there is no right or wrong in knitting. I could tell you 4 fundamentally different ways to knit an SSK with the exact same outcome. And I could show you 5 different left-leaning decreases you could knit instead. In fact, my last video was all about it. But if you find something is easier to knit or looks prettier, then that's entirely your decision. I said it before and I'll say it again, as long as you are just knitting for yourself, you and only you get to decide what brings you joy and what you like. In knitting, the best technique is always the one that works for you. And this also means if you are struggling with a technique, Google it and see if there are alternatives. I promise you, you will find something. And very related to this topic, and I have to admit, I have been guilty 1 or 2 times myself, but please try not to ever berate other people, especially if you are not a master knitter with 30 years of experience under your belt. A lot of people try to convince other people that they need to learn continental knitting to get faster, or I don't know, that English throwing was better if you have arthritis, or they tell you the way you tension your yarn or you hold your fingers was wrong. Don't ever do that. If you share something, and I mean it's wonderful that you share your experience, make it about you. Say something like, oh, it's so interesting how you tension your yarn. I have to do it like this, otherwise I get problems with my joints. There is a whole lot of a difference between that and saying you should hold your yarn like this, otherwise you will get problems. Knitting should always be about finding what works for you and not about trying to fit into a mold and trying to replicate what works for others, regardless of your preferences and how your body works. I mean, of course, within limits and using common sense. Number 3, don't ever belittle your own work. I don't know about you, but I doubt I could count the times I heard someone saying, it's not perfect, but here's my new sweater. Or it's full of mistakes, but here is my first pair of socks. Most knitters love to share their finished work online because often we don't have friends in what they usually call real life that care about knitting. And sharing is certainly fun. I mean, personally, I love to see how my readers interpret my knitting patterns, and I'm very sure you also love to see what other people come up with. But when someone mentions the mistakes they made in the first breath, it almost annoys me. Because whoever said things need to be 100% perfect? If you buy a sweater in a store, there are mistakes in that as well. Sloppy seams are very common. I certainly am not perfect either, and I'm aware of the flaws in my knitting. And that is totally okay and sometimes even healthy. I mean, how can you get better without identifying those areas where you could improve things? However, that's an issue between you and your knitting. When you communicate that publicly, it's in the best case a self-defense mechanism, because when someone points out the flaws, you can always say, well, I told you so. And sometimes it's even a call for attention, because then someone can reply along the lines, I don't see no mistakes, it's perfect. A lot of people do that with their cooking as well. And you know what? It is totally not needed. There are millions of people out there who cannot knit a single stitch. So when you finish your first sock, no matter how many mistakes there are, that already puts you ahead of millions. Sure, there's better knitters, but that doesn't mean you cannot be proud of your work. You just have to have a certain error tolerance, just like big companies have. Most of them will define a certain number of flaws that are acceptable for a finished project because perfection is unattainable or uneconomical. And if there are mistakes, embrace them as learning opportunities. Look at them and ask yourself, okay, this didn't go as planned, so how can I get it right the next time? And don't gloss over them like they didn't happen or act strong and all perfect. That's unhealthy as well, because you will build a wall around you and that makes you difficult to approach, and at one point it will crumble. Say, here's my first pair of socks and I learned so much knitting them. I'm so proud of myself. Off to start the next pair. And if someone comments in a negative or non-productive way, ignore it, because it's just their way to deal with their own insecurities and maybe a vain attempt to appear superior. And you already carry your own load, no need to accept someone else's burden as well. And this brings me directly to my next issue. Don't ever compare yourself with others in a negative way. I've seen it on Reddit, Revelry, Instagram, Facebook, and obviously here in the comments on YouTube. Often I read something like, I wish I could knit as fast as you, or your knitting looks perfect, mine always looks a bit wonky, or I could never knit that, it looks so complicated, it's beyond me. First of all, setting aside that a lot of good lighting, props and Photoshop goes into a lot of things you see online. You never know the backstory of the person either. So maybe they are a professional master knitter and they have been doing this for 30 years straight. And you are maybe in your last quarter of your life, your hands are not as nimble as they used to be, or you just started out knitting and you've only been knitting for a year or so and your muscles still have a lot to learn. So when you compare yourself, always look at the full picture and not how fast someone can knit stockinette stitch with super slick yarn, 4mm needles, a very loose gauge in a highly edited video. Or compare the stitch definition of handspun novelty yarn with superwash merino wool. I don't think that will get you anywhere. And if you do, always keep in mind that you and only you get to define the joy this hobby brings to your life. Maybe you are slow. Maybe you are not good at certain techniques yet. Whatever. As long as you are having fun, it really doesn't matter. A lot of knitters are process knitters, and I know quite a lot of knitters who knit one shawl after another because they really like knitting shawls, but they never actually wear them. So speed really doesn't matter in the first place. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't ever compare yourself. Living in a bubble of your own creation is probably not the smartest idea ever. What I'm saying is that this comparison should not be done in a negative way. Just because someone is faster than you doesn't mean you are a bad knitter to begin with. And it doesn't mean the hobby cannot bring you joy. If that was your approach, you could probably not do anything in your life because there will always be a better person, a bigger fish in the pond. And I already said it in a previous video. Often, the reason why you worry is exactly because you care so much about this hobby and that love is something to celebrate. There are actually millions out there without a fulfilling hobby. So if you see someone who's faster or knows a certain technique you haven't mastered yet, ask yourself, how can I get there? And will this new skill bring me more joy? And not come to the conclusion that you are a bad knitter. We all started somewhere, and if you give up because there's someone better than you, well, that and only that is the difference between them and you. Number 5, ask the right questions. You can't imagine how often people comment on my blog or here on my YouTube channel asking things like, how many stitches do I need to cast on for socks or for a baby hat? While the question is understandable, you need to realize it's the wrong question. First of all, any mother will tell you that baby clothes, they don't come in one size. There are infants that weigh 8 pounds at birth and some 4.5, and the circumference of the head will differ in a similar manner. So to begin with, the better question would be, how many stitches do I need to cast on for a head with a circumference of 38 centimeters? And even then, I couldn't possibly answer without knowing your knitting needles, the yarn you are using, the knitting stitch pattern, and your individual gauge. Ultimately, the right question would be, how do I, emphasis on I, figure out how many stitches I need to cast on for a baby head? And the answer will always be, knit a swatch, count the stitches, and do some easy math. Now, I know a lot of people don't like knitting swatches, but I'm telling you, there is literally no way around it. And the thing is, if you are knitting a pattern, or you follow a sock chart, or anything else that appears to provide an easy answer, you need to knit at least one swatch as well so you can meet the gauge of whoever created the instructions. Otherwise, that information is worthless and often you will need to knit 1, 2 or 3 swatches. Sure, sometimes you get away without knitting a swatch, sometimes you are lucky, sometimes there is enough give that 5 or 10% off doesn't matter all that much. Still, I want you to challenge the myth that knitting patterns is easier than working with recipes. Actually, I would hold it's exactly the other way around, because when you are knitting from a basic recipe, you can accommodate all your individual traits, preferences, and choices, while when you knit a pattern, you have to squeeze in all your skills and tools into a pre-designed mold and try to make it fit. And sometimes your body just won't play along one way or another. Or what sadly happens much more often, you end up with a garment that does not even remotely fit. So I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to understand swatching and to understand the way knitting shapes fabric. Once you get that in your head, adjusting any pattern will be a breeze. I often like to compare this to tourist guides. I don't know if you ever went abroad to see a different city and you had a tour guide, and all day you followed them along and they told you lots of interesting stories, but then you were standing in a square and you literally had no idea where you are and in which direction your hotel was. And that's because you were so intent on following that you never looked at a map, never at street names, and never really bothered to remember the path that took you there. Sure, if you are designing your own patterns, there are bound to be mistakes. It actually might be a rough start, but I can promise you that you will learn so much more along the way, and the learning experience will be so much more intense when you try to figure out things yourself. And I mean, it's not like you need to start from scratch. There are some amazing books like Unbud, I think it's called The Handybook of Sweaters and The Handybook of Patterns. I recommend it in my video on the best knitting books. There are tons of amazing information in there that help you design your own patterns. So really give it a try. And regular viewers might already know that I like to share little bonus messages at the end of most of my videos. And in this case, it's support your fellow knitters. Whenever I see someone commenting on my videos here on YouTube or on Instagram, it truly means the world to me. This sounds totally cliche, but I truly mean it, because every little comment, even if it's just a little thank you, is saying, hey, at least in my mind, is saying, hey, I enjoyed what you shared so much that I'm willing to give something back. And a lot of people just like a post or a video, or not even that. And I mean, that's okay. But often, taking even 5 seconds to reply to someone can make such a big difference, especially if the other person is a beginner. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about myself, even, like my video and comment on, please do that. But I'm talking about all the millions of knitters on Facebook, Instagram, and wherever, not professionals, but regular knitters. Because sharing is not only caring, sharing is love. A nice little comment literally costs you nothing, but for the one on the other end, it sometimes can be a huge difference. As I said in the beginning of the video, a lot of knitters are lonely, at least when it comes to their hobby. They're sitting at home, knitting for hours, and often their partners and family, they're only mildly interested. So if you give them some feedback, and remember to keep it positive, that often means a lot, and it doesn't cost you anything. Besides, if you don't give, how can you ever expect to receive anything? Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment below if you feel there are things you would like to add, things you liked or disliked, and maybe you even want to challenge one of my positions. That's totally okay as well. And of course, consider subscribing to my channel in case you don't want to miss any new videos. Usually I publish a video about specific knitting techniques or knitting patterns every week. Happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day.